All right, welcome back, my algebra students. I hope you've been enjoying these videos as much as I have. um, we are on now our fourth video. This is Unit 4, Lesson 4, and our objective today is that students will be able to factor trinomials of type ax squared plus bx plus c, where a equals 1. Okay, so what you have to understand about what the A, B, and C, those are just going to be numbers, right? And those numbers are going to change for every single example. And so we just put variables in there to show that these numbers are going to change. Okay, and notice something else, that it is in descending order. This is a second degree trinomial, isn't it? And notice that I have it in descending order. That's very, very important. Okay? So just a little bit of a review to help us understand this next subject. All right, so here on the board I have two binomials that I'm going to be multiplying. Okay, so we're going to quickly do these two because we've already done this in a previous video, right? So I have x plus 2 times x plus 3. Right, so again, the key here is distribute. So I'm going to distribute the x to both sides over there so that I get x times x is x squared, and x times 3 is 3x. All right, so now I'm done distributing the x. Now I distribute the 2 to both terms over there. And I get 2 times x, which is 2x, and 2 times 3, which is 6. All right, so now you'll notice I have some like terms here. All right, so I have 3x plus 2x is equal to 5x, and I just bring everything else down. And that is finished. It's now a trinomial. So whenever I multiply two binomials, I usually will get a trinomial. The one exception for that is if like this was a positive 3x and this was a negative 3x, that middle term would cancel out, and you would just be left with x squared plus 6x, or plus 6. All right, that's kind of an exception, special case. Okay, so I want you to, before we go into this other problem, I want you to take a look at something. My two numbers here are 2 and 3, right? So I'm going to write that here. So 2 and 3 are my two numbers, right? Now, let's look at our B, right? That's B, and our C. B is 5. B equals 5. Let's write this right here. B equals 5, and C equals 6. I want you to see if you can see a relationship between these two numbers, 2 and 3, and this 5, and this 6. You might want to pause the video and see if you can come up with the relationship. All right, so let's go ahead and do this one, and we're going to see this the same relationship, and then I'm going to give you kind of the principle that we need to know. All right, so again, I'm just going to distribute. All right, so x times x is x squared. X times negative 1 is negative 1x, right? And then I get, distribute that 3 now. So I get 3 times x, which is a plus 3x, and a 3 times negative 1, which is negative 3. I'm just distributing. Okay, so once again we have like terms here, right? So negative 1x plus 3x is going to result in 2x. Okay, and I just bring everything else down. I bring my x squared down, and that's a positive 2x, right? and then I have a minus 3. Okay. So I want you to see it once again. What are my two numbers here? My two numbers are 3 and negative 1. 3 and negative 1. All right? And what is B and what is C? B is 2. And C equals negative 3. Do you see a relationship between my two numbers in my factored form, 3 and negative 1, and my B and my C? Well, let's come back to the very first example. Did you figure it out? All right, well, 2 and 3. How do I get 5 from 2 and 3? I add. 2 plus 3 is 5, right? Now, how do I get 6 from 2 and 3? Multiply. 2 times 3 is 6, right? So these two numbers are always going to be, the B term, right, this middle term, is always going to be the sum of these two numbers. And the C term, right, is always going to be the product of these two numbers. Let's see if it worked over here. Okay, I had 3 and negative 1. Okay, what's this sum? Well, 3 plus a negative 1 is, bingo, 2. And what's 3 times negative 1? Negative 3. Bingo, it works. All right? So that's a very important, very useful concept to understand. That B is always going to be the sum or the difference of these two numbers, and C is always going to be the product of those two numbers. Okay, that'll be very helpful for us because our objective is we want to factor trinomials, and that concept is going to help us greatly. All right? So let's go ahead and factor some trinomials. Okay. So let's go ahead and factor. Oh, my pen isn't running out here. Let's go ahead and factor x squared plus 8x plus 15. X squared plus 8x plus 15. All right, so the first thing you need to look at is it in standard form? Yes, it is in standard form. So that's really step 1. Make sure it's in standard form. That means descending order. Step 2. Find a GCF, a greatest common factor, if you have one. Okay, do I have a greatest common factor? Well, here's a 1 right there. So 1, 8, and 15. The only thing they have in common is a 1, so that doesn't count. Do they have an x in common? Well, these two have an x in common, but this one does not. So there is no greatest common factor. All right. Step 3 is we're going to use what was called the AC method. I just call it the X method because you make an X here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to set up an X. This is a very visual way of factoring. It will help you. Okay, in this area right here is going to be A times C. This area down here on the bottom is going to be B. What do I mean by A, C, and B? These letters are just these coefficients in my trinomial. So in this case, what is A in this trinomial? Well, A is just 1. I have to know my ABCs, right? So A is 1, B is 8, not 8x, just 8. And C is 15. Okay, so once I know my ABCs, I can then put my numbers into this x. Okay, so what's A times C in this case? Well, A is 1, C is 15. So 1 times 15 is 15. All right, and B, well, that's just 8. So I'm going to put the 8 right there. All right, so now here's where that concept that we just talked about is going to really help out. Okay, so I want to find two numbers that multiply to give me 15 and add or subtract to give me 8. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. You might even know the numbers already. Can you think of the numbers? Well, there's two possibilities for getting 15 by multiplying. I could go, let me use a different color here. I could use 1 times 15, correct? 1 times 15 is 15. But 1 plus 15 is not going to get me to 8. 1 minus 15 is not going to get me to 8. So I know that one's not going to work. Okay, but there's another way to get 15. You guessed it. 3 times 5. 3 times 5 is 15. 3 plus 5 is 8. You see that? Bingo. So those are my two numbers that I want in my factored form. So now all I have to do is set this up in factored form. And remember, factoring is just expressing a number as a product, or in this case, a polynomial as a product. So see that? That's something times something. So what am I going to put over here? Well, I know in order to get x squared, I have to have x times x, right? X times x is going to give me x squared. Now, what numbers do I put here? Well, we already figured that out. These two right here. And by the way, it does not matter where you put the 3 and where you put the 5. Okay, I'll just put the 3 here, and I'll put the 5 here. But we're missing something. We need an operator symbol. Should these be pluses or minuses? Well, look at your numbers. That's a plus 3, right? So I'm going to put a plus again. That's a plus 5. So there you have it. This right here is the factored form of this trinomial. Okay, now you might be wondering, well, why do we need to factor things? Why do we need things in factored form? Well, you'll see. You'll see in the next few videos why factoring is so helpful. Okay? So that's our first example. All right, so let's take a look at one more example. It's going to involve a little bit more than this one. All right. And let's get rid of that too. All right, so let's do one more example here. Okay, I want to factor x to the third minus x squared minus 30x. Looks a little bit different. Yeah, we have a third degree trinomial, don't we? Can we factor that? Well, let's take a look at our process here. First, is it in standard form? Is it in descending order? 3, 2, and there's a 1 here, right? 3, 2, 1, blast off. That's in descending order. We're good. Second, find the greatest common factor if possible. Do I have a greatest common factor here? Well, this is a 1, and that's a negative 1, and that's a 30. The only thing they have in common is a 1, and that doesn't count. Okay, how about the x's? Do they have an x in common? Well, this guy's got 3 x's, this guy has 2 x's, and this guy has 1 x. They all have an x in common. They only have 1 x in common, right? So I'm going to pull that x. That's the greatest common factor, right? Greatest common factor. They all have an x. And then I'm going to set it up as a multiplication problem. Okay, because that's what factoring is. It's expressing something as a product. So x times what is x to the third? Just x. X times x, well, that's x squared, right? So we need another one there. So x to the first times x to the second is going to give me x to the third. You just simply have to add the exponents, right? 1 plus 2 is 3. All right, now I need to find my middle term here, okay? I have a minus sign there, so I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. Okay, so x times what is x squared? Well, I need an x, right? If you want to put that in there, what? 1 plus 1 is 2. You don't really need it there, but just, it is there. Okay, now this guy right here, x times what is 30x? Well, I know I'm going to need a 30. Do I need an x over here? No, I don't, because this x is already here. So x times 30 is 30x. Okay, so I factored out a GCF. That's my second step. The last problem, we didn't have to do that. There was no greatest common factor, but sometimes there will be. And so you have to factor that out. Okay, so now we have a trinomial, a second degree trinomial. Okay, so now we're going to do our x method. Okay, so let's go ahead and set up our x. Let me use a different color here. My black is running out. And you got to know your ABCs. All right? So what's A and what's B and what's C? Well, I'm just going to ignore this GCF over here for now. A is that number in front here, which is 1. And by the way, in this lesson, A is always going to be 1. Next lesson is going to be where it's greater than 1. So A is 1. B is, what B is? -1. All right? Make sure you get your positives and negatives correct. If they're not correct, your whole thing's going to be wrong. All right? And C is -30, not +30. Okay, so now I know my ABCs. Now I'm ready to factor. I'm ready to figure out my 2 numbers that I'm going to need. Okay, again, AC is going to go right here. B is going to go here. Okay, so what's A times C? Well, let's see. 1 times -30 is -30. And B is -1. Okay, so now I need to think of 2 numbers that multiply to give me 30, or -30, and add or subtract to give me -1. Well, there are lots of ways I can get 30 by multiplying. Right? I could do 30 times 1, right? 30 times 1 is 30, but 30 minus 1 not going to get me close to 1, right? Okay, how about 15 and 2? 15 times 2 is 30. We'll worry about the negative later. 15 times 2 is 30. 15 minus 2 is 13. I'm not going to get there, right? So I could do 10 times 3. 10 times 3 is 30, but 10 minus 3 is 7. Still not close. Oh boy, is this going to be workable? What else gives me 30? Well, how about 6 and 5? 6 times 5 is 30. 6 minus 5, is 1. Hey, I think we're onto something here. Okay, now the only problem we have is, okay, where What about our signs? Because 6 times 5 is positive 30. It has to be a negative 30. In order to get a negative number by multiplication, one of these has to be negative, the 6 or the 5. The question is, which one? Well, if I make the 5 negative, 6 minus 5 is positive 1. That's not correct. If I put the negative over here, negative 6 times 5 is negative 30. Negative 6 plus 5 is negative 1. Bingo. That's going to be our two numbers, negative 6 and 5. Now all that's left to do is put it in factored form. So let's see, I'm just going to put it over here. So I'm going to set up my two parentheses. Again, don't forget about that greatest common factor. He's still there. I'm going to put him out there. Okay? Now, to get x squared, I just need x times x. All right? That's the easy part. The hard part was figuring out these two numbers. But we know what they are now. They're negative 6 and 5. Okay? Negative 6 and a positive 5. You could have also written it as x plus 5 and x minus 6. Just make sure your negative sign is in front of the 6 and your positive sign is in front of the 5. All right, and there is your factored form. All right? So I hope this was helpful for you. Make sure, if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to my channel. And hope this is helpful. If you have questions, you can leave comments, you can text me. So anyways, good luck, and I'll see you next time. God bless.